Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to our Fine Arts Foundation meeting today. We're very grateful to the Claremont Lewis Museum of Art for letting us meet here, and just walking through the other couple of galleries looks quite like a very interesting exhibit. I'm Sally Monastery, and I'm president of Fine Arts this year. And I would like to remind you of our next program on March 20th at 2 in the afternoon. We'll be back at Scripps in the Hampton room. And our, where's your donation? Our presenter is Judith Davis, who's a graduate of Scripps College and has done a lot of work in the arts. And her topic is moving through the dimensions of sculpture and dance. So hope to see you all there. And now I would like to introduce Martin Betts, who is the executive director of the Claremont Lewis Museum of Art.
Thank you. Well, welcome. I'm the recently hired, I'm not new anymore. I've been here, I think, 7 months now. I grew up in Claremont, so this is a whole new experience for me. I haven't been here in 30 years, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to come back and give something back to a town which was very good to me growing up, and I really enjoyed, my life here as a young person. And now I'm back to work on this other big project we've got going here. So welcome, and I want to introduce Seth, who's a great person to work with. We've become fast partners here, and he's got a wealth of knowledge that is amazing. And we are both CGU graduates, right? Seth, want to go ahead and get started?
All right. But welcome to the Kalai Kai Gallery, and getting cozy with us here for this presentation titled, Is This a Chair? I'm the curator of the exhibition. It's one of the biggest group shows that we've done. Thanks to the expansion of the galleries, we're able to do some bigger shows like this. So it's really it's a regional show with a Claremont kind of Pomona Valley focus, showing the range between functional furniture, chairs, and conceptual art. And we, as many of you probably know, we have a great history of both in this area. So I wanted to show them in the same space to show, kind of how we can learn things about the other, from one another. You can learn things about conceptual art from functional furniture and vice versa. I have a slideshow to talk about kind of my thinking, my thought process around the exhibition, some of the inspiration. And then we'll do a gallery tour of the other two galleries after the talk is done, if you want to follow me through the galleries. All right, so the title of the exhibition is This Is Not a Chair, which takes inspiration from a painting that many of you are probably familiar with by Rene Magritte titled The Treachery of Images, which I love that title. Many people refer to it as This Is Not a Pipe, because I don't speak French, but I'm told this says This Is Not a Pipe. So yeah, it's from 1929. So I like to try, with some exhibitions to kind of show art from different eras, different generations. So the inspiration for this show actually goes back, almost 100 years to this piece that at the time it was really ahead of its time, right? In terms of like conceptual art, the use of text, and what I'd refer to as self-referential deconstruction. So the piece is like aware of its own language and the way images function, and it's kind of breaking that down. So there are kind of many ways to interpret the piece. Kind of the most basic is that he's talking about representational painting is not the object itself, right? But there are all kinds of ways to think about it. And what I love about the piece is that it kind of shows the flimsiness of language when you start to look at, how does the language, what's the relationship with the painted image, and how the word pipe is never an actual pipe, right? And how language is abstract and, is never the same as an object, right? It's language is concept formation and generalizations. So I wanted to, use this kind of framework of thinking to think about chairs. One other source of inspiration was this book by Foucault titled "This Is Not a Pipe," which I highly recommend if you're into the Magritte piece, where he just really dives into all the different kind of philosophical, implications of "This Is Not a Pipe." And there's this line from the book that as soon as he begins to read, in fact, shape dissipates. So in terms of reading the language, that that dissonance between object or representation and language, it kind of falls apart as you really start to dive into the meaning of the words. Another work of art that is kind of a related historical work of art would be 1 in 3 Chairs by Joseph Kosuth. So it's kind of another way of thinking about language, definitions, chairness. I want people to think about, what is chairness? What is that essential thing that makes a chair, right? So this piece, at first glance, it's kind of a little clinical. Like he's got a chair, he's got a picture of the same chair in the room, and then he has a dictionary definition of a chair. What I think is really fascinating is when you learn that, Joseph Kosuth, he was conceptual artist, Fluxus, where he would give directions for a piece that would be completed by whoever's installing it. So it's very much about language and its interpretation. So whoever's installing the piece would select a chair. They would photograph the chair in the space and then print it out. And then he did have the definition of a chair that he provided. But I like that whoever's installing the piece has to interpret chair, right? And what if they had some weird interpretation of what a chair is, What if they put a love seat there or something, right? Or a stool, Would that make sense for Joseph Kosuth? So an interesting kind of precedent. I definitely prefer "This Is Not a Pipe," though. I feel like it's just got a much more kind of playful, experimental vibe, and especially with that title that I mentioned, "The Treachery of Images," right? I feel like it must have been, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but also like speaking to, the potential for getting tricked by an image, right? So I like "This Is Not a Pipe" a lot better than Joseph Kosuth's piece, but interesting precedent. And so I wanted to kind of carry that vibe into the show. And so since it was hard to read on the Kosuth piece, his dictionary definition of a chair, if you agree, is a seat with a back and often arms, usually for one person, a seat or office or of authority of the office or the office itself, the person occupying the seat or office, especially the chairman of a meeting, a sedan chair, a chaise, a metal block or clutch to support and secure a rail in a railroad. I did not know that was another definition of chair, but I love the definition, how it talks about backs and arms and legs, and also humans. Like, we're in a college town, lots of chairs of departments around here, right? So it's very much connected to the body. And to me, chairness kind of depends on it, the body in its presence or absence, right? There are a lot of different ways a chair doesn't necessarily have to have 4 legs to be a chair, but it has to kind of support the body and kind of be one with the human figure, right? So, like I said, I wanted to kind of channel this vibe of this is not a pipe, and maybe, you know, get people to just ask the question of what is chairness, you know, how do you define a chair, but have kind of a playful approach to it. So I came up with a line that I used that you may have seen in the text at the beginning of the show. If a tree falls in the forest, is it a chair? And so I hope you can see this image. It's an old image, but it's, you know, a fallen tree, and then people are sitting on it. I wanted to, you know, engage with the humor of that statement of playing with the, you know, if a tree falls in the forest bit, but also ask an important question of defining chairness, and that would be, is, you know, human intention and intervention required for a tree to become a chair, right? Does someone have to decide it's a chair? Before the word chair existed, could a chair exist? Like, would it be a chair before there was a word to define it? So lots of interesting questions that you can kind of jump off from this is not a pipe. I found this on the internet, which I thought was pretty interesting too. So is this a chair? It looks pretty chairish, right? But it's interesting, like, this one feels like if you didn't tend to it or sit on it, it could also just kind of like grow back into tree form, right? So it's kind of maybe a temporary chair. That's Peter, the wonders of the internet. And this is another chair design company that I've admired. So they're called Full Grown. And this is one of the chairs in the chair farm. I don't know what you call it, the orchard, the chair orchard. So they have forms that the tree grows into. And then they cut it off and they flip it over. And that's what the finished product looks like. And they just kind of, I think they use like a grinder or something to smooth out some of the bits that your body comes in contact with. But otherwise, it's all just the way the tree grew. And this company has a really fascinating kind of origin story with, this is the designer, Monroe, sorry, I just blanked on his first name. Gavin Monroe. He's from the UK, and this is him when he was a kid, and he had to have multiple surgeries to correct his spine. And so he spent a lot of time sitting in a hospital bed, just kind of observing, you know, the trees out the window. And he describes this as being kind of, an early seed for his way of working with chairs. When he would, just be watching, watching the trees grow out the window, and while his spine is being formed, by these surgeries and this apparatus, it's very similar to the way he forms a chair, which I think is really fascinating. All right, so we got Mr. Maloof, who I'm sure many of you, maybe all of you know, but in the words of Jimmy Carter, America's greatest woodworker, born and raised locally, and we've got the avocado chair from the Maloof Foundation at the back of the gallery, which I could talk more about later. But I wanted to talk about Sam's way of kind of presenting himself, defining himself. He would say, I'm not an artist, I'm a woodworker. So, were his chairs sculpture? Does it depend on the context, right? So if it's in, Sam's office and it's being used, is it a chair? And then if it's on a pedestal and, you're not allowed to touch it, then does it become a sculpture? And does Sam get to decide, or do we get to decide, right? So that's another way to think about definitions of chair. And I thought it was interesting how Sam, he presented himself. I feel like he was very aware of how, he kind of created his own mythology and kind of amplified his values as a woodworker. And, he didn't just say like, I don't think of myself as an artist. He would say, I'm not an artist, So he really focused on kind of that, the craftsman, woodworker language. And so maybe when I ask, is this a chair? Is that a chair? Your answer is like, well, yeah, they're all chairs. Quit asking silly questions, right? So my response would be, it's a yes and situation, right? So they're not just chairs. They are, this and that, right? So chairs are cultural signifiers, social catalysts, narrative objects, and anthropomorphic extensions. So we'll go into those a little bit. So some chairs as cultural signifiers. I've got a few pieces from the show, and then I've got other pieces kind of sprinkled in here as well. So Adam Manley created the waterboard chair as part of a series called Ordinary Rendition, where he created torture devices made in a very like chic way, right? That fits in with your hip modern furniture. And so, he's kind of asking questions about craft and the craftsperson, and because it's the same person, could be the same person who makes your rocking chair that makes the waterboard used to interrogate suspects. So really interesting way of thinking about how craftspeople fit into our culture and our how furniture objects are a reflection of the culture. This is not a chair, but this is a representation of this chair by Lauren Verdugo. So the story behind this one is she was challenged by Architectural Digest, she and another furniture maker, to take a Walmart folding chair and transform it in one day. So, she took her fine woodworking skills. And Lauren is, so speaking of like Sam Maloof, excited in this show, we've got some Sam Maloof and Sam Maloof Woodworker Incorporated pieces. And we've got Larry White, Sam's first full-time apprentice. And then Lauren Verdugo is Larry White's apprentice. So anyways, back to Lauren. She made this amazing chair, starting with a Walmart folding chair. And so it's this merging of high and low culture, right? Kind of more disposable objects with like more fine woodworking. I think her work is really interesting. She kind of spans the functional furniture, but also does conceptual art. She has a piece on the wall back here that's pretty great. And then we've got a piece from our last show. I threw that in there of Ken Gonzalez Day. If you were here for that one, you know that it's a little hard to see in the picture, but it was a device for creating a tracing of your profile in order to judge one's character in these racist old ways of thinking about ethnicity and the body. So definitely a reflection of the culture. And then this piece we have by Tanya Aguiniga, who's an LA artist who kind of grew up between Mexico and Los Angeles and across the border. She took an Eames chair and added like wool and felt, and so she's kind of mashing up these different kind of craft references. And the chair is called For Ray Eames of Charles and Ray Eames, the couple, furniture designers, and she was an artist. We have the chair as a social catalyst. So in the Marguerite McIntosh Gallery, we have this courting chair by Liz Nuremberg. And Liz's work is, like sculpture and furniture, and it manipulates how people interact with each other or their environment. So it's just this really interesting way of, instead of like a love seat, she turns one person so you're facing each other. And I feel like that piece, it kind of makes you realize that all furniture is doing this, right? All furniture is kind of affecting, your posture and what your interaction with the room, your environment, and the people in the room. I threw in a piece by Neha Chokshi, who's in LA and spends some of her time in India, sculptor, conceptual artist. Because I just love this piece of the swing set in a circle. And you can imagine, if you and I don't know how many 10 of your friends got together on this, what would happen, And of course, as a parent of small children, I would think, put this on the playground, it would just be chaos, right? But super fun way of thinking about how furniture can be a social, catalyst. And then I threw in the British Parliament also to think about like how the arrangement of the furniture affects the social dynamics, right, or the political dynamics, the struggle for power, just different ways to think about furniture. And then we have chairs as narrative objects. So we have the avocado chair, which I mentioned, is at the back of the room. It was made from Sam Maloof's beloved avocado tree that was there on when he and Elfrida purchased the property in 1953. It was a citrus grove that also had this majestic old avocado tree. And when the house had to be moved, when the 210 freeway was coming through, they actually saved some of the trees and transplanted some of them to the new location where the house is now. But the avocado tree could not be saved, unfortunately. So, of course, Sam, saved the wood, had it milled, had plans to make something out of it. Never did. He passed away. But John Scott, board member of the Maloof Foundation, commissioned Mike Johnson, who was continuing on the Maloof shop, to make a chair out of the avocado wood. And John Scott donated that to the foundation. So the foundation lent it to us. We're very grateful to the Maloof Foundation there. But I love that this, it's like a piece of home, right? They lived there for like 50 years with the avocado tree, and it's a connection to place. We have some chairs by Jane Brucker, who did a whole series on Elizabeth Milbank, who was an early advocate of public health and was a real change maker in creating public access to like sanitary, bath houses and things like that, and access to health care. She collaborated with Judson Glass Studio to make these pieces. So Judson, they've been around for like, I think more than 100 years in LA. LA's oldest, like stained glass studio. They've done a lot of amazing collaborations over the last few years. And then we have Maria Abramovich and Ule, her performance partner, when she did this performance that, I can't remember if that was at the Guggenheim or MoMA, but she would basically just sit and look at visitors. They'd sit with her for however long and just make eye contact, right? So it's easy to ignore the furniture in this situation, right? Like, what's the functionality of the furniture? Like, why is there a table? What does the table do, So it's the furniture is kind of like the stage for a theatrical event in that case, right? So the chair as anthropomorphic extension, like I talked about the connection to the body of the chairs, right? So Liz Nirenberg shows up again because we've got some of her sculptures are like carried or worn and sort of facilitate interaction. And then there's the courting chair again. We got some paintings that our Mark Posey did. They're basically still life paintings, which I think it's interesting to have a chair, especially a brick chair, in a still life painting, because I feel like you can't look at a chair without, sort of imagining bodies, right, or people. But he's just got one little peach on there. But I love his paintings. They're kind of surreal. They're kind of wacky. When we've got the heavy seat from Peter Shelton, which is in the first gallery, and there's part of a piece called Floating House Dead Man, and there were these really heavy pieces. This piece weighs like 1,300 pounds around the outside of the gallery, and they were acted as counterweights for this house that was actually floating in the gallery, and you could walk in this house. So, he referred to the counterweights as dead men. So it's kind of like the chair as a body, as dead weight. And then of course, if you know Peter's other work, you know how in that context there's a lot of like anthropomorphic shapes and kind of abstractions. This is another one of his sculptures. They're just full of like vessels and orifices and body parts, but all like really abstract. And then I thought I'd end with a plug to the Maloof Foundation and the Jack Rogers Hopkins show that's coming up. We do have a sketchbook of Jack Rogers Hopkins in the middle gallery, which I was very excited to get, because most of his furniture that's available that wasn't destroyed in a fire a few years ago is at the Maloof Foundation. It's getting installed right now. And Jack Rogers Hopkins, he went to Claremont Graduate School in the 60s and then ended up in San Diego. And when I was putting together the slideshow, I realized like that picture with them on the tree really reminded me of a Jack Rogers Hopkins piece. He would have like a chair with, it's got a light and it's got like a place to put a book, or who knows what all these appendages are, right? But he was just a visionary furniture maker who a lot of people don't know of, but hopefully this show at the Maloof helps spread the word. So I think that's the last slide. So we can kind of start the walkthrough tour while you're all just sitting in here, since we're kind of full. I can talk about a few of the pieces in the gallery here that I haven't talked about yet. So we're very excited to have a few pieces from Doug McClellan over here, who ran the Scripps College art department in the 60s. And these are pieces, so he left to go teach up at Santa Cruz and ran the art department up there. And he did a lot of these chairs that are each one's sort of in its own allegory, right? Lots of found objects and metaphors and assemblages, like found object assemblages that are really interesting, kind of remind me of like Wallace Berman kind of work. And he's somebody who came up in Claremont, kind of on that other side of the spectrum with the conceptual art side. And so let's see, there's a chair in the back corner that is on the ground. So you probably can't, a lot of you probably can't really see it, but that's one that you actually can sit in. And it's made by Geology Studio, which they've only been in Claremont for a few years. Adam Friedman is the designer. He grew up in Santa Monica. He and his wife lived in Detroit for a while, and then they just moved to Claremont a few years ago. But it's a really interesting technology where it's made from blocks of wood, but they form fit to your body, so you got to try that out. It's really, well, there's a cushion underneath, and the pieces are loose and just kind of fit together like a puzzle, and so they have room to kind of slide against each other, and it's surprisingly, amazingly comfortable. And then, so we also have the shiny bronze one back there is John Niero, who's a Claremont designer. And that piece, it's actually inspired by some traditional African chair forms, but then he's got it in this like super fetish finish kind of plexiglass with like, looks like automotive paint on it. Kind of speaks to like, artists from like Venice in the 60s, making like these very like high finish kind of objects. Yeah, like Jerry Mahoney, another local artist. All right, so we can walk through the other galleries. The middle gallery might be a little cozy, and then when we get to the Macintosh gallery, we'll have more room to all hang out in there for a few minutes too. So if you want to follow me through, we'll talk about a few more pieces here.